Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day two, or is it day two and a half, the final day of the 12th edition of the West African Internet Governance Forum. Thank you very much from wherever you're dialing in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The very first session of today is Emergent Issues in the Digital World. This session will be a session where we will share trends and insights in different areas covering climate change, digital economy, data economy, and most importantly, COVID-19, which is what we're doing now. We're living in the new normal now. The moderator for this session is Lily Edinam. She's the Community Engagement Lead and Board Member of HackLab Foundation. Lily, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Good morning and welcome. Where I come from in Ghana, we say Ndeye and Miawezo. From the start, you were here, and we have come this far in this conference because you and I are still here. We've defied all location barriers, and we are working towards a common good to strengthen that which connects us, which is the internet. I want to welcome all of us to today's session, and I promise you it's going to be exciting. We have topic experts all present on the panel, and we'll be dissecting the topic emerging issues in the digital world. Like Folake mentioned, we're going to share trends and insights in the following areas: climate change, digital economy, the data economy, and the gaps in the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And let me show you a bit of the streets of Accra today. So looking right out of my window is Accra. So good morning from Accra. You get to see the streets here today virtually. And let's get right into this. Thank you. So my panel members are the Wisdom Donkor from Ghana. He's the president and CEO of Africa Open Data and Internet Research Foundation. And you have Madame Fatou Thiam. She's the minister from Senegal, the Ministry of Digital Economy in Senegal. And we have Madame Titi Akinsami from Google. Glad to meet you here. And then we have Abdulkarim Oloyede. He also joins us here from the ITU. So thank you and welcome to the panel. Good morning once again. Without much ado, we'll just go right into the discussion. And if Wisdom is here, Wisdom, can you hear me? I want you to give a brief introduction of yourself and what you do. So Wisdom, if you're here, the floor is yours.
Lily, can you start with somebody else while Wisdom joins the call?
Right, that works well. So go straight to Madame Fatou. Bonjour, Madame, and you're welcome to the panel. So briefly, tell us what you do, and we'll go right into the first question.
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci Lily. Merci à tous les participants. Je suis Madame Thiam, Ndeye Fatou, coordonnatrice de la cellule d'études et de planification au niveau du ministère de l'économie numérique et des télécommunications. Je suis ingénieur informaticien, mais nous travaillons beaucoup sur les stratégies, sur les TIC, sur comment utiliser l'économie numérique pour mieux développer l'économie nationale. Merci Lily.
Merci, Madame. Thank you. And so if you can hear me, we go straight to Madame Titi Akinsami. You're welcome. A brief introduction from you.
Good morning, everyone. Name is Titi Akinsami, as Lily has shared. I have worked in public policy around the technology sector for quite a few years now. I am, pre-COVID, I would have said I'm primarily based on an airplane. I commute by airplane. But with COVID, my life has changed significantly in that way. My focus has always been on the capacity and the ability of technology to really influence and change the way we live our lives. And I've primarily worked, focused on how we can enable not just governments, but a range of, society, including particularly civil society, to have the right policies and regulations in place to ensure that we can continue to innovate and to grow. And I'm super excited personally and professionally that we're actually able to have the first, totally virtual West African IGF conference. And so far it's been a success, I believe, for me. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Then we'll go straight to Mr. Abdulkarim, a brief introduction about you.
Um, Thank you very much, and it's an honor for me to be here today with you. I want to thank the organizers of the West African IGF, and it's also an honor for me to be speaking after Titi, because I'm one of those coming after our own generation. I am a senior lecturer in the Department of Telecommunication Science, and where I know Titi from is from ICANN. We've never met before, but I know the name very well. I'm also an ALAC member with the ICANN. I represent Nigeria at the ITU, and also I teach wireless telecommunication both at the University of Ilorin in Nigeria and also at the University of York in the UK. And I'm a Universal Acceptance Ambassador. And it's an honor for me to be joining today. And what I do majorly is telecommunication policy. And that's all I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the introduction and glad to have you all here. I'm very excited as you are, Abdulkarim, to be talking to all these topic experts. If you know my career path and where I'm seeking to go, you would know that this means a lot for the young people also coming up. Thank you so much. So we are going to go straight into the discussion. And we'll take
Sorry,
the first
Lily,
question.
Wisdom is online.
All right. Hi, Wisdom. You're welcome. And I almost placed the call right now. So you're welcome, Wisdom. Share with us briefly. Weasel.
You F1.
Okay,
my name is Wisdom Donkor, the President and CEO of Africa Open Data and Internet Research Foundation. Also, a committee member of the Ghana SDG Roadmap, Data Roadmap. I also work with the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition. I think recently I have been elected to the ICANN GNSO Council. So for now, I'm a council member, and I will be speaking more for Africa. Looking at the situation that we are in now, my focus now is mostly on how to help the agricultural sector with open data and technology. Also looking at community network to supporting farmers at a rural level. So that is the focus now from where I sit.
Right. Thank you so much. We'll delve deeper into this in a bit. So you are taking the first. You actually take the question first. So if you can stay on Wisdom, you have the first question. Our first question to you is from the work you do in the digital space and regarding agri, like you've mentioned, what issues have emerged in the wake of COVID-19? Are they different from the times past?
Yes. Looking at where we are now, where we are coming from, and then where we are now, and then looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the African Union Agenda 2063. I think we still have a lot to do with regards to the agricultural sector and also looking at the health sector. I think with this pandemic that we are in now has revealed a lot within our system. And then the first of it is data. Now we have seen how data is very important in decision making. We've realized that there are so much data gaps within our systems, and not only Ghana, it cut across Africa that we need to address. When you even take administrative data, and then the way we use data is very poor, and we need to be looking at that and see how we can address the data gaps we have within our region. And also, now the reports that I had from the Global Open Data for Food and Agriculture, now there is a prediction that if we don't tackle our food issues very well, there is going to be food shortages, and it's going to affect the developing world, Africa, mostly Africa. It's going to affect us very well. So we need to see how we can leverage on technology to help this sector, to help the farmers, to making the agri sector more lucrative for people to start going into that sector, so that we can produce more food to feed ourselves. So that is the focus now. And then I think all of us in a way, we eat. Without food, we will not live. So we need to come on board and then see how we can help with technology, address the agri issues in our region.
Right. Thank you for the submission. So Wisdom has mentioned that yes, times have changed, and it requires a collective effort and redoubling of our efforts to actually make sure there's continuous food supply, not only in the South region and the world at large. So we go straight to Madame Fatou. And Madame Fatou, so the same question also goes to you. From the work you do, what issues have emerged in the wake of COVID-19? Are they any different from the times past? And so the floor is yours. If you want to share your screen, you can go ahead and help me share the screen.
Merci Lily.
Thank you, Lily. Now, for the first question, there will be no need for me to share my screen because it's a general question. As part of the digital economy, Senegal's strategy was to make Senegal an emerging digital economy with its Vision 2025. Senegal is strengthening telecommunications infrastructure, encouraging applications, and to see with the priority sectors how to work and to use ICT. Now, with the emergence of COVID, it was almost a complete stop of activities. Now, what we saw was a sudden reduction in physical presence work. Initially, Senegal was not in total lockdown, but in semi-lockdown. So we saw the private sector begin to be paralyzed. Meanwhile, Senegal had put in so much to have applications developed, and that was before the emergence of COVID. So with COVID, all these activities began to slow down. So we have taken laws, placed states of emergencies, and also halted movement throughout the region. Now, all the international meetings that we had to organize had to stop, because with digital economy, we have to speak to other Africans, share with other people in the region, but unfortunately, we have not been able to have face-to-face international meetings. Also, airports had to shut down. And unfortunately, we had started really working on these areas, dynamizing these economies, but all that slowed down with COVID-19. In some remote areas, the application could not get there because we could not get these things across there. So the pandemic started when we had really started dynamizing the digital economy. We are promoting e-commerce, but we realize that a good part of the population is still not used to ICT. So that affects e-commerce as well. So COVID-19 has affected the digital economy, which has slowed down because of this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you can hear me, Madame Titi, Madame Fatou, thank you for the submission. So we've seen the rapid move of activities offline to more remote work, and we also see the digital divide that is existing in rural and urban areas, and the acceptance or the skills that we need to actually reap the benefits of online work. So we go straight to Madame Titi. If you can hear me, the same question also goes to you. From the work you do in the digital space, policy and all, what issues have emerged in the wake of COVID-19? Are they different from the times past? The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Lily. So having worked in the digital economy, what historically sometimes have been referenced as the information and communications technology sector, either for development or otherwise, there's one thing I can say, that there's nothing new under the sun. What COVID-19 has done is actually shown light, or shed even more light, and extrapolated the existing issues, the major gaps that have been in place, that has not been paid attention to, or that some work had been done on. There are significant ramifications of COVID-19, of course. They're swift, they've been indiscriminate, right? There's been no opportunity to adequately prepare or say that, this is the kind of response that we can actually be put in place. Unfortunately, and as is expected to a large extent, it's people who are living in poverty, or people who have been cut off, people who are on the other side of the digital divide, that have been disproportionately impacted. In terms of the numbers we're seeing, it's looking, the economic fallout will likely be plus or minus about 500 million people. We don't have the numbers yet in detail, but certainly a large proportion of that is going to be sitting out of our continent. And interestingly, significantly, quite a number of those will be sitting out of West Africa. Now, specific to the digital economy, what are some of the gaps that have emerged like never before? Economic recovery and growth is going to be very painful. And I use that word very deliberately because for once, there's no shortcuts. If you don't do and have the right things in place, it's going to be significantly problematic. Another major thing that has emerged, and I think we see the impact with AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, where negotiations were supposed to have started off the 1st of July, and directly impacted governments cannot even go ahead with this conversation. Why? Access is an issue. Have we been talking about access? I've been working in this sector for the last 20 years, started as a really young lady, and sincerely, access is still a problem. 20 years after, excuse me, we couldn't go on with the African Free Trade Agreement. So there is that. Another major gap that has emerged, and anyone who's actually followed my work or actually heard me speak at any point in time, we realize this is a song I've been singing for the last few years. Data protection gaps, issues around privacy on this continent have emerged like never before. Because all of a sudden we have not just governments, but even society trying to identify people that they need to be able to engage with to address the lack of economic opportunities with COVID, etc. Well, we can't find them. Why? Because we don't have, or in some cases you can find them, but the digital identity preparations are completely off the tracks. I've had, again, based on my work with Google and the public policy space, I know at least half of the countries on our continent, a lot of them sitting in West Africa, have been putting up what we call contact tracing apps. Countries are, partnering with the private sector, which is great. Private sector meaning local startups. But they are putting in place contact tracing apps with no data protection laws in place. And I'm not even talking about whether these data protection laws are great or not, whether they enable innovation, whether they respect privacy or respect human rights. Even the most basic, not in place. And it's the big players, including Nigeria, all the way through to countries like yours, Lily, and Wisdom, that have a Data Protection Act in place, but implementation has been come-see, come-sa. I have two more points I want to be able to speak to in terms of the gaps that have emerged. And then I'll mention one really good thing that has emerged. We speak of gaps, but I'd like to be able to speak of the positive as well, is the fact that in as much as there has been conversations around access, there are two sides to it, a positive and a negative. The narrative has always been that access is an issue on our continent. This West African IGF proves that, yes, access is an issue, but there are many shades to that access being an issue. So at the very least, one of the things I was on the lookout for is the number of participants that we have today. I was also on the lookout over the last 2.5 days. I've been quietly watching what kind of interruptions we would have. Absolutely none. And this is being co-hosted by ECOWAS. So do we have the will? Do we have some of the infrastructure in place? Absolutely. But are we ensuring that it's equitably accessible? I think that's where the problem is. The other major gap that we have found, and I speak as we when I say Google, and this for me is a personal peeve, is that unfortunately we have been most affected in the educational sector, meaning folks who are coming, who are still learning either at the high school level, university level, or even the most basic level, have not been able to continue with their education in any reasonable way. There have been innovations around the use of WhatsApp. There have been innovations around the use of old technologies like television and radio. However, what's the quality of education that has been emerging? And I think that for me is the major issue that has emerged. Now, one big plus, sincerely, is that now there has been an acceleration in the acceptance of the digital space. When you asked me to introduce myself earlier, I inferred this. I know that historically, even as early as as close as February this year, early March, I tried to get some meetings in place, and I said, let's have a virtual conversation. And people go like, no, we need to be able to be in the same room. Absolutely, there is room for face-to-face, but the amount of resources that we can actually save and redirect to engagement, if we can leverage technology like we are right now, is absolutely priceless. So yes, some gaps, major gaps, they build on what is already in place, but it's presented as an opportunity as a continent, as the ECOWAS region, to have integrated discussions that can actually lead to actual action. My final point, ECOWAS, has been at the forefront of, the integration of the West African digital space, digital trade, etc. I think that presents an opportunity for us now more than ever before. The ability to be able to not wipe off, but better connect trade that currently happens across the West African corridors in the digital space is a unique one that I think our governments particularly need to sit down together to address in a bigger way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. Very profound mentioned. And we see that, yes, there's nothing new under the sun. The pandemic has only shown the light on the nuances that exist. And we see the gaps in economic recovery and growth. We see that in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the stall or the halt of it. And we see the gaps in data protection. And I see in the chat that it turns out the problems in data protection is not too unique to every country in the sub-region. Almost everyone has it. Somebody all the way from Central Africa is saying the same thing in the gaps in data protection. And we also see a highlight or a bright light to what has happened now with the acceleration of people accepting digital tools. Thank you, Ma. And we go straight to Dr. Karim. Dr. Karim, you have the floor now. From the work you do, what are the issues that have emerged? Are they different from the times past? You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. It's an honor for me to be speaking after my big sister, Titi. And it's good to see that she's talking about data privacy and things like that. Those are issues that we need to be talking about right now. And she's saying the right things. And I'm sure we're talking about emerging issues after COVID-19. One of the things we would have all seen now is that elderly people, a lot of them now use the internet. It's not just only the younger generation that is actually using the internet. For the elderly people, the internet is now becoming a lifeline. It's a support for them because that's the way they could actually talk to kids, their children, family members, because everywhere is locked down. And even when it's not locked down, it's not safe for them to be moving about out there. So the internet is now a crucial element for all generations, both the younger generation and the older generation. For the younger generation, schools are closed. The way we are now communicating, the way our kids are now going to school is by online teaching and learning. So the internet is now an essential part of our daily life. It is more crucial than ever. And one of the critical elements of the internet is the top level domain, which we call the TLD. The top level domain, which is usually wherever you want to have access to anything on the internet, you need to have the domain name. And the last part of the domain name, which is the .com, whatever it is what we call the top level domain. Historically, the top level domain has always been limited. You have it either as a 2-string or 3-string, the top level domain. That's what we have. And historically, they used to be in Latin characters. However, by the year 2000, when ICANN introduced the new TLDs, the new TLD enabled the largest expansion of the domain name system. So when we had the new TLDs, we started having the longer scripts like .bank, .africa, even the controversial one like .amazon. And by the year 2010, what we started having is what we call the internationalized domain name, which is IDNs. So the internationalized domain name was the beginning of what we call the universal acceptance. Therefore, the universal acceptance is the principle that every top-level domain should function by writing all applications regardless of their script, the character, even if it's the old or the new scripts. So you have the old scripts like the .com, the ones, and the new ones like the .africa. Everything should be able to use the internationalized domain name. And what do I mean by internationalized domain name? Internationalized domain means we should be able to use our local languages, because this is a fundamental requirement for us to have a truly multilingual, digital inclusive internet. Universal acceptance ensures that all domain names, including the long ones, the new ones, the email address, the IDNs, okay, equally they can be used on the internet to enable application, devices, and systems. Technically, they must accept, they must validate, they must store and process all domain name equally. If this is not done, then we have what we have a problem at hand. That means what will happen is some internet users, for example, if I have an internationalized domain name, if my email accepts that, my email server, and yours does not accept that, what means is when I send you an email, then there's going to be a problem for you to receive that email. So therefore, it is not something an aspect or a group of people can implement and others will not implement it. Everybody has to implement, everybody has to be universal acceptance ready. So the thing is, universal acceptance is important, especially for us in West Africa. We have two major languages in West Africa, English and French. If we're able to use if everybody is UA ready, then we'll be able to have our domain names either in English or in French, and we'll still be able to communicate with each other. So what has emerged now is the fact that we cannot attend online physical meetings. We need to network more from home. We need to work more from our various locations, and IDNs, it is what we expect to allow us to have internationalized domain name, would allow us to have access to the internet more readily using our local language. And it is something that we should all know about. It's something that is emerging, and it's something that should support us as internet users, both for the younger generation and the older generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And speaking from a technical perspective, he's laid out all the things we have to do to actually actualize inclusivity and to also have local language content online. And he said that everyone is accepting the internet now, not only the younger generation, everyone. And it has become a digital fabric that is now interwoven into every part of our lives. And the technical bits and the foundation on which it's built is also really crucial to having a sustainable and an inclusive internet. So we take the second round of questions, and we're going to be brief on this, and then we can have questions and answers from the people in the chat. So, Madam, we are going to start first with Wisdom. Wisdom, over to you. We're going to, the second question is asking, so what are the challenges and opportunities? I think you've already hinted some of these in our earlier conversations. So I want us to dwell on the work you're doing and the current initiatives you have that are addressing the issues that have emerged and what challenges and opportunities exist. So Wisdom, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lily. Looking at the entire region, let me use Ghana as an example. We have internet is one of the biggest challenges is what internet data. We realize that governments across Africa, let me say Ghana, for example, have reduced electricity bill and then water bill. But then when you look at the essential component of which is the internet data, government is refusing to reduce data on that. And with this is kind of hampering productive work, online work. I think our government should begin to look at this look at the internet aspect of it and begin to do something about it, so that all this distance that we are talking about, all this COVID protocol and all that, so that workers can begin to work from their home using maybe less internet data. The other thing that I'll mention is the role of spectrum. It looks like internet penetration is more concentrated within the urban cities. So government have to begin to look at that. And of course, ECOWAS can look at this and as well see how they can champion it at ECOWAS level, so that government can begin to make available some unlicensed spectrum to non-governmental organizations that would like to deploy some of this community network or internet solution at the rural level. I think if this is done, then that means we'll be including everyone in the process. Now, the work that currently we are looking at is we, from my end, we are working on is looking at the stock level. It looks like we are consuming every food that we have within our country. And then, all borders are being shut. And then there is no way that you can go out and begin to import or export food and all that. So we have to begin to look at our national stock level to know, to have that measurement, to know whether we have enough food or less food. And the other aspect also is looking at how to as well help farmers digitizing the farming sector. We need to begin to look at that, trying to deploy all solutions, looking at spatial technology, internet solutions, mobile solutions, and of course, talking about the free trade area that Titi mentioned, we also have to look at that. I think when this is fully implemented, it's going to benefit the farmers most, and it's going to benefit the region as well. So we have to begin to look at these critical sectors, maybe agric one. We have to look at the health sector as well. And then we should also not leave out education. We also need to look at education. And the most important aspect of all this is also capacity building. When you're doing all this and then you are not building capacity, there's no skills. We are getting nowhere. So we need to look at this critically. And I like a statement from Niena, I think 2 days ago on a high panel. She made mention that ECOWAS shouldn't represent only our government, but then ECOWAS should represent citizens as well, so that they know some of our concerns and not listening to only government, but then they have to listen to we the citizens as well and know exactly what we need, so that they can help push some of those policy changes that we need to do to help us achieve what we want to do, what we want to achieve. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much. So Ndeye in the chat. So sorry, Madam Ndeye in the chat. She's actually applauding the comment you just made. And from your chat, I just picked more on education, more on capacity building, and the availability of information and data to actually help in decision making and even future projections. So to actually have all this available to plan around them. Thank you so much for your input. And we look to also see more work with your initiative, Africa Open Data, in this regard with capacity building and to address some of what you've actually picked up. So straight, we go to Madame Fatou. I think this is where the presentation come in. Madame Fatou would share on the initiatives that have emerged to actually tackle some of the things she mentioned in her earlier presentation. So Madame Fatou, if you can hear me, the floor is yours.
Oui, merci Lily.
Thank you, Lily.
Donc, face à ces problèmes que j'ai cités pour
So
la
Faced with the challenges that I spoke to during my answer to the first question, I will now be sharing my presentation to go over the rapid response that Senegal has put in place to address this challenge. Are you able to see my screen?
No, not yet. Can you try one more time?
If you could try sharing it from your end, since you have the presentation.
Right, Joshua and the team, if you can hear, please project Madam Fatou's presentation. Thank you. Okay, Madam Fatou, I can actually see your screen. Yes, I can see your screen.
D'accord. Donc là, comme je disais, pour le Sénégal.
So, as I was saying here, for Senegal, we have the Senegalese digital strategy for 2025. I don't know if it's visible, but here we have strategic area 4, where we focus on digital distribution, which in here we focus on health. When COVID happened, we had to consider what Senegal's capacity was to address it. So here we had to once again verify the bandwidth, number of users, number of persons connected, and also look at the penetration rate. And it all showed that it is possible for Senegal to resolve its challenges. There was need to properly manage the lockdown and ensure that the state services continue to function, also improve sector performance and economic growth. So Senegal has begun to work in partnerships between the public and private sector, and especially civil society. We have a very organized and substantial digital response. We have a logo in Wolof, Boy Dole, means there is strength in unity. And it essentially shows that there is much to be done that we can do if we work together. So here, a lot of Senegalese experts mobilized, volunteered to support these states. And let me emphasize, they volunteered, they did this of their own will, and this is provided as a voluntary service, and it was very broad. So Senegal worked with its private sector, developed applications. We saw applications that were very quickly developed, and Senegal was able to develop and achieve, thanks to its national expertise, this tracking software. Yes, we already have laws towards data protection. We will use the Data Protection Committee, and working with them, we arrived at a consensus on how to share data, indeed, to improve monitoring, contact tracing. There was need to have the data of individuals to facilitate their traceability and monitoring. And with this coalition, we have been able to ensure continuity in state services. And so we have this site, this platform that allows us to organize meetings such as council meetings, councils of ministers. We can also organize through the platform international meetings. International meetings, for the most part, had been cancelled, but thanks to video conferencing, we were able to hold many of these. And in all of it, we see the constant support of communication operators, and we bear witness to their loyalty and everything they've done. They've increased bandwidth For example, over the past 3 months, an agreement was signed between the state, operators, and the private sector. And within the agreement, they have increased bandwidth. They've also made available to citizens certain promos so that they're able to access increased bandwidth and also facilitate money transfers. We have uniform platforms that have also been set up, thanks to which you're able to trade, make purchases and send money. So to say that we're quite organized, we're very organized, and thanks to that, we're able to address the challenges, COVID-related challenges. And also with this coalition, we have a platform that really shows the success of ITC, the importance of ITC in our work. And also, this platform is free. We have websites now from the Ministry of Health. We also have covidalerts.sn, where you can simply log on and indicate if you've been contacted. And the Ministry of Health will trace the person and contact them. In addition to that, Senegal has been able to involve even more isolated people, because as it's obvious, certain people had been disconnected from the rest of the country. Well, thanks to the private sector, we're able to identify, do some geolocalization of health centers, geolocalization of health professionals, the closest ambulance, the closest medical assistance to persons in isolated areas. Thanks to this coalition, we've also been able to, as I said, make an agreement. We've signed an agreement between the private sector, the Ministry of ICT, the Ministry of Health, within that coalition, all towards collaborating for COVID and to reverse the effects of COVID-19. Thanks to these collaborations with the Ministry of the ICT, Health, and other partners, we've also been able to make available to people, in particular, the relevant line ministries. Our ministry, for example, made available 1,000 modems to civil servants, essential staff who would be required to continue their work during the pandemic with increased bandwidth, as I said earlier. They've made available thanks to the operators, and now you're able to access emergency treatment. You can connect, and the national private sector on ICT has made available also specific platforms that link health service providers directly to individuals who require treatment, and also to facilitate contacting. So we've made available tablets to them. And thanks to the tablets, they're able to consult online. It wasn't easy to learn to write with a stylus, for example, but now we've been able to facilitate it, and now you have systems where a healthcare provider simply needs to click on a button and he's got the vital signs of his patient. So just to say, really, we're able to pool resources, and I would say that we properly anticipated the situation, and thanks to that, we were able to strengthen the toll-free line, the hotline. So we have now 1919, and 1919 is a free toll-free number you can call. So if a person feels he may have come in contact with the virus, he calls 1919, and the emergency services will come to you. And Senegal has taken a major decision, which is to contact and trace all persons exposed to the virus and to isolate them in hotels. And not only are we able to do this, but you're able to do it remotely using your smartphone, using your tablet, and from there you can make an order and have it delivered to you. We couldn't have done this without the increased bandwidth that was made available to us, and and without the facilities for online payment. So with all of these platforms that were put in place rapidly, we're able now to monitor, we're able now to trace, we're able to map, we're able to contact and to geolocate persons, and especially we're able to very easily develop logs that we can use. Also, in terms of digital communication, the community mobilized to create better awareness. Just like my brother said, in local languages, we have various flyers in local languages, and we've also introduced e-learning. We have a channel, the education channel, as we call it, that we use for e-learning. We also have used certain websites to encourage learning at home. We're really trying to urge people to stay at home, learn at home, and for now, all schools, those that have resumed our examination classes, but then all others are urged to continue to work from home, online, on television. They can take their classes. So
Right.
early on, in early days, we had a lot of challenges, but as let me just quickly conclude. As COVID progressed, we were able to resolve issues, create awareness, but also sensitize people. And we're counting on the digital economy, and that will certainly help us um, to strengthen, to build on our progress. For Africa, we would say improve technologies, organize online meetings, and we feel that with experience, we did not always need to travel to be physically present. We could use these networks to communicate and also to set up centers for excellency in emerging technologies. I thank you. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And we see the work you've done in actually ensuring continuity with digital tools. So we see basically that technology is an enabler. So we'll go straight to Madam Titi, because our time is fast spent. We'll try to make this as brief. So we just want to know the initiatives that your office is working on to actually solve some of the issues that have arisen and what the work is. And quickly after you, we'll take Dr. Abdulkarim. There's one question that we'll also briefly answer, and then we'll close the session. So Madam Titi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lily. I will do my best to be as succinct as possible. I try to speak in bullet points. So
Right.
there are a couple of things I already identified in terms of the gaps, etc. A few of the things that we as Google have been doing. One, around education. Obvious, access is an issue. How do we respond to it? One of the really great things that we have in place is called Google Suite for education, but then there's also the Google Classroom and resources for teachers. Those who have been following our stories across the continent, but even in West Africa particularly, know that we have been doing a lot of digital skills training. So we've continued to do that. We've continued to actually provide those trainings, in a virtual setting. But we're aware that a significant proportion of the population are not able to be online. So part of what I have done as part of my office is actually provide what we call community grants to institutions that have been able to bridge that gap where they have been able to take some of the content. We have enabled them to take some of our content from Google Classroom and adapt it for an environment, that is reliant on radio or television. So, one particular institution is Teach for Nigeria. We're in Ogun State and also now in Lagos and in other parts of the state of the country, Nigeria. What they've actually done is partnered with government to take the curriculum itself and adapt it, where they're extrapolating this through their teacher fellows. So that's one. We've done similar in Ghana, but in Ghana, the support we actually brought to bear has been with partnering with what we call it's called WAC-BIP, and they are primarily at the forefront of helping governments to test the COVID test centers, but we have also given specific funds for them to be able to do research locally that would respond to COVID, the COVID crisis, meaning helping to identify if there's a possible solution out of the plethora that we have on the ground. Second, I come from the civil society background. Private sector is a significant part of my career. I spent plus or minus about 7 years in the civil society sector. One of the things we've also brought to bear is actual direct support for civil society organizations across West Africa, across Sub-Saharan Africa. One of those examples is opening up Google for nonprofits. And I'm super happy about this. And yes, I understand. I can hear the questions already. Is this targeted at Francophone Africa as well? I'm working on it. But for as many civil society organizations that are sitting here, please go check out Google for Nonprofits, register for it. A significant part of, what opens up is you get access to all of the, Google platforms for free. And the major one, you should take note of this, is that you get access to ad grants to the equivalent of $10,000 every single month. Now, that's not money we should be leaving on the table. That's the money I should be letting you leave on the table. These would go a long way to actually extrapolating a lot of the work that you actually do, not just in your local, but also helping you to raise funds as well. That's one other thing that we have done. What else have we done? We've been very, very direct in supporting health institutions in country to better share knowledge around what's happening with COVID. I have provided through my office to a number of, West African governments as well, what we call search ad grants to the significant amounts that, would still be announced. But, that's one of the main things we have done. What else have we done? On the policy side, sincerely, one of the things that, I have heard from across many countries is that government has just looked at the digital sector and said, oh, you guys are prospering at this point in time, we're going to tax you some more. Absolutely not. It actually pinches on everybody because, I saw in one of the comments earlier on that data is killing us. The cost of data is ridiculous. Now, if you're thinking that, digital organizations are beginning to prosper, whether they're startups or whether they're a Google, it's actually not the case. We are feeling the pinch as much as is possible. Google as an institution, yes, we work as an ad company, meaning we serve ads. But if you look at the travel sector, nobody's advertising. Who's going anywhere? Borders are closed, right? If you look at the entertainment industry, who's actually doing that? So all of that actually has a call-on effect, where one of the mottos I'm working with as a public policy lead this year is doing less with less, meaning I have smaller budget. So the ability of government to sit and then think, okay, we're going to tax you more, it's not necessarily the right response. You might think you might be able to tax more the bigger players, but what happens to the startups? What happens to the innovators in the space as well? And then I think on a final note, two things. I have been singing this song for long. I mentioned earlier contact tracing, etc. If we're going to get it right with digital trade across West Africa, across Sub-Saharan Africa, across Africa, with AFICTA or with any of the work that ECOWAS is also leading, we need to be able to get data protection harmonization right. Not because we are trying to be GDPR compliant, no, but because we are trying to enable ourselves as a continent, as a sub-region, successfully. It's not just about saying, oh, we're going to have one currency. That is the most make-up part, right, of the conversation. We need to be able to integrate and sign off on our agreements on a major basis. So that's on data protection. I think the final thing I will mention, and this hasn't come up much, but with more people being online, I have begun to see a whole lot more of infringement around intellectual property. I'm not sure how many countries in this space in West Africa actually have an updated Copyright Act that deals with intellectual property, that deals with fair use of content. So, sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times I go to conferences, I speak, or I write something, and I see somebody else has copy-pasted with pride, with no acknowledgement. How are we addressing some of that? How are we addressing the issues around intellectual property when it comes to innovation? So I think that's definitely something else that we are pushing forward on as well. Thank you, Lily. Back to you.
Thank you so much. This was succinct, really. And thank you for mentioning all that. And I see in the chat that Eva has dropped the link. And Ma, if you're able to, you can also share with us a link to the grant for not-for-profit, or you can just actually do a Google search. I think this is Google. You should find it. And thank you, Ma. So right to you, over to you, Abdulkarim. In about 2 minutes, are you able to share what you're doing to address the emerging issues you just mentioned to us? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to say, let me start by, first of all, somebody sent a question to me and they were saying, what is the difference between English and French language when you are typing out? If you look at some of the French language, for example, you see some E has something like a dash on top. And for that, when you're talking about internationalized domain, you should be able to do that when we have the internationalized domain. And also, it's good to hear what my big sister, Titi, has been mentioning, and I will still come back to her. I have to tell her that publicly. So, in terms of challenges, I think more than 50% of the world are actually non-native speakers of English, but about 50% of the content on the internet, and actually the international domain names are actually in English. And this is one area that it's a challenge for us. And at the moment, what we see is for all of us, generally, we are much more comfortable when we see somebody that speaks our language. And we all use the internet now. The internet is like our next door, it's our best friend now. So it's also good for us when the internet, that who is our best friend, is actually speaking our language. We will be much more comfortable with the internet. And even those that are elderly who do not usually use the internet would be able to use the internet. And one of the major problems with internationalized domain name is the fact that the software, everybody must be on board. It's a challenge because if I am on board, if you are not, then it's going to be a problem because all the computers on the computer network has to speak to each other and they have to understand themselves. So there has to be a way to understand that there is a difference between the E and the E that has a dash on top. So with IDNs, we will be opening up the internet for more people. That's in terms of the opportunities. A lot of us, we know now at the moment, about 50% of us in the African region are still not connected. And by the time we are connecting this remaining 50%, it's better to be connecting this remaining 50% in a way that they would understand the internet better and they would appreciate the internet. Therefore, all we need to do to be universal acceptance ready is for us to know that IDNs will allow us to remember our domain names much more easily. Because by the time I'm able to write my domain names in my local language, then it will be easy for me to remember those domain names. Then we'll also be able to communicate better. Then more people will have access to the internet. So for us, for me, I'm a Universal Acceptance Ambassador. And my current initiative as a Universal Acceptance Ambassador is to go out and tell the world about the importance of universal acceptance, talk to teachers, talk to policymakers, talk to the technical community, government, everybody, tell them what we need to do because of the fact that we have to be UA ready in general, all of us. In terms of universal acceptance, there is a steering group, which is a community initiative, which is supported by ICANN. Thank you very much to ICANN. We have ambassadors like myself from around the world. At the moment, we have about 4 ambassadors from Africa. We have about 2, I think, from West Africa, myself, and one other person from Benin. And our goal is a better, inclusive internet where all can be comfortable to teach, socialize, learn, translate, transact business, and carry out legitimate activities that would make our life a meaningful one and an enjoyable one. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and right on time. Thank you so much to all the panel members. Thank you for bringing different perspectives from your stakeholder engagement or your stakeholder groups to the table. And we've been able to gather at the end of all that the internet is for everyone, and that in such times, it's actually almost a matter of life and death. And we understand that there is more that's to be done policy-wise, technical-wise, data-wise, and there's more that's to be done. So this is a call to all of us and to all stakeholders that the efforts have to be redoubled, and there are more things that we all have to also voice out. And ensure that things have been done rightly. Thank you so much. There's a question in the chat, and what I'm going to do about now is to have some of the panel members, if you're able to answer in the chat so that we're on time. I'm certain that we'll be able to have some time